And welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Friday, February 3rd. I'm your host for today's program, and we're going to go straight to an interview with an Ojibwe Kwe and friend of ours, Denise Sweet, and talk a little bit about things that happen during winter, or at least are supposed to. Denise Sweet, thank you for joining with us on the Native News Update for the weekend edition. I want to let you say greetings to all the people and get into talking a little bit because I want to talk about the fact that we're right smack in the middle of the winter and say, what kind of things have you been up to?
Well, I want to say bonjour to all my friends in the great state of Wisconsin, the Great Lakes region, especially the Anishinaabe up in Red Cliff, my grandchildren. I want to say Happy New Year to you, Hoyan, from Oneida country. I'm here in Green Bay, and I was just in the last week or so attending ceremonies and being a part of the midwinter observance. Lots of things are going on, and this season reminds me of the time that I started working on my master's degree, which I wrote a thesis on oral tradition. That's the season right now, isn't it?
Tis the season that a lot of people actually have time to write, actually have time to storytell. Historically, people were in the lodge, and there might have been a little bit more snow way back then, before global warming, because we're in the middle of what seems to be a January thaw all the way through January and into February. Traditional time for storytelling. Let's talk a little bit about that because for those people who write and do poetry, it seems to me that wintertime deep in the lodge was a time to be creativity. What's that bring to mind for you?
Well, it brings to mind for me what I felt during the ceremonies that were going on, and that is the presence of the ancestors. When we gather together, as many cultures observe, our ancestors, at least the good memories and the stories that they told us, the songs that they wanted us to remember, the ceremonies that they wanted us to take part in. I remember the ancestors more than anything during this time of the year. As you know, I spent a lot of time with elders at Ray, at Red Cliff, the late Dee Bainbridge, Saxon St. Germain, Bill Sutton, others who just were extremely helpful in teaching me the importance and the principles behind oral tradition. It's a wonderful thing.
Indeed, not only oral tradition, oral presentation, I think of a lot because I'll bring it back to home a little bit. This great big issue about an open pit mine in northern Wisconsin is a big deal to people in the Great Lakes. We've had tribes looking at it and saying, indeed, Bad River is known as a wild rice haven, and this potential open pit mine means a lot. And people were talking about lots of people. One of the things I said, and I think one of the things I saw is that before the 1854 treaty, there was one chief with a handful of people by the name of Buffalo, who went to Washington, D.C. to talk. In that same vein, I saw an elder get up there at Bad River, Joe Rose, and say a couple things. Number one, he said, there will not be a mine in the Pinocchio Range, period. He clarified it to this little point. He says, maybe someday the United States will get into a war or something will happen where that ore body is absolutely essential. It's not going to go away. It's going to appreciate. It may be a gift to our grandchildren 7 generations from now. It may be worth 100 times more. But maybe the sacrifice, maybe the potential destruction of the wild rice downstream by some accidental thing would be worthwhile the sacrifice for the country. Maybe we would do something like that. So there was this little edge about saying under the right conditions, maybe Bad River would be willing to endanger that wild rice if, the idea was something bigger than that. One person, Joe Rose, one person in elder getting up there and say, the mine, it's not going to go in. And I think that's all that took compared to thousands and thousands of people. I don't think anyone in Madison saw him. Orators, honed during those winter months when they were storytelling and being animated and being poetic and all that. And I see a lot of that in the people that you hang about. You got a writers conference that you're
Yes,
beginning to
yes,
plan.
exactly. There is a writers' conference that's coming up, and it's going to be held in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, September 5th through the 9th of this year. We're going to be starting at a little conference center at UW Milwaukee, but we'll be moving our take our show on the road and go to Indian Summer and spend time with the public there. We have been all of us have been involved in education, as you have, Paul, and we decided that the Writers' Conference needs to take the resources that are coming from virtually all over this hemisphere and expose the people who come to Indian Summer to the resources, to the performances, to the presentations, the scholarly articles that will be presented. So we're real excited about that. And the point that you had made about the elders, about Mr. Joe Rose from the Bad River, is that story is a very important component of who we are as tribal people. The eloquence, the ferocity of principle that Indian people hold, you really have to know how to engage people in an earnest fashion. And I know that Mr. Rose is quite gifted in that way, and I know a lot of storytellers understand that story alone is not enough. It is theater, it is performance, it is drama. Right now, I also want to tell you about a manuscript that I'm reading, written by the late Eddie Two Rivers.
Yeah.
All of contemporary art, the contemporary literary expression is always tied to our oral tradition. That same eloquence, that same drama, we rely on that to get people to understand who we are. And I wish there were more storytellers in the public school districts.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's unfortunate that for some reason oral capabilities of expression were downplayed to this intellectual writing and intellectually getting the punctuation exactly correctly and
Mhm,
intellectually empirical kind of a thing.
mhm.
And yet I see what we're doing today having come in a full circle. Newspapers are flat, radio stations are audio, but you can't see visual. But what we're doing here when we're talking brings, I think, some facial legitimacy to us. People can perceive who we are and see
Yes,
how we're discussing that, and that brings credibility and legitimacy to the issue.
I think so. I have um, I have so many good memories of hearing stories at this time of year. And I think, again, Native people uh, felt there was function in form, there was process and uh, validity in story. And the theme of the stories now that we hear are about, of course, gratitude,
Hmm.
but it's also about the adventures of a trickster figure. For us, as you know, Winnebuju or by some other name, it is this lonely character who tries to fit into society. He bumbles along, he makes mistakes, he teases people, and people sometimes want to move away from him because he's a trickster, he's a prankster, but he so longs to be a part of the village, a part of a larger body of people. And in the wintertime, don't we all kind of feel a little isolated in our cabins or in our apartments or what, our timeshare in Florida? I don't know. We
Wherever
get,
it may be.
yes,
Because I was just going to say, I says, we've got a winter social coming up here on February 11th, just to remind people if you happen to be around.
yes.
This is a stripped down winter social. It has no committee, it has no budget, it has no agenda, it has no rules or regulations. What it is if you have a drum and you want to come in and sit down and sing from 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon until 9 o'clock that evening, you're welcome. If you want to come with your outfit and dance, or without your outfit, you can come and dance. There's no gate fee, there's no exit fee, there's not, it's like, let's just get
No
together and
competition.
yeah,
Yeah.
let's just get together and sing and dance and have a meal together. You start serving a meal at 3 o'clock, and then when the food's gone is when the feast is over. It's not going to be like a break from 4:30 until 6:30, and then we've got to do this formal thing. We're actually
Mm.
getting rid of the grand entries, which a lot of the elders says was replicated off of the rodeos. So again, it's getting together, sharing food, song, and dance when we are isolated. Indeed, we all look
Yes,
for
it does.
that.
in the dark. And this is also the time that people would, I remember talking to people from Sinte Glushka, the college in Rosebud, and they talked about their astronomers or their storytellers who told star stories, studying the winter sky and making stories, and their preeminent job for their lives was to create stories about the stars. I mean, that is so beautiful to me. I know that in the winter you're looking for things to do, but we had a way to keep ourselves warm, huddled together, telling story after story, being entertained, but also our identity being affirmed, as well as the kind of behavior that we considered boorish and considered proper in village life. So lots of lessons, lots of teaching going on, but also entertainment and safety from the cold.
Safety and protection from the cold in winter. How do we save ourselves from the politics of the country and the state? I mean, it's always bothering me. What's your impression? I'm just reading today that the Speaker of the Wisconsin State Assembly says he hopes he never has to use the Glock 26 semi-automatic subcompact weapon that he now carries and brings to the floor of the assembly and keeps near the podium. What's the world come to when the Speaker of the Wisconsin Assembly carries a Glock into the state capitol and says, this is what it's all come to?
I don't know, Paul. I know that these are desperate times for everyone. I know that sometimes Indian people appear to be stubborn or rigid or hanging on to the past. But what we're actually doing is keeping our promise. The promises that we engaged in during the treaty making period mean something to us. And we will maintain those promises. There was a time when I thought maybe we ought to abrogate the treaties. Maybe we ought to just get rid of them, and that's what people want. We don't have to deal with the treaties anymore. But some of them were put together so that non-Indian people could enjoy the life around the Great Lakes region. We abrogate the treaty, then everybody has to go home. We don't want to do that anymore, do we? So it's a sticking point for Indian people, and the only way sometimes I think predominant culture knows how to deal with us is in a sort of the wild, wild west fashion through
Yeah,
guns and violence.
indeed.
We're sending our people to school, or they're coming back as lawyers and as doctors and as scholars. The war goes on in the courtroom now, if that's
It's
what it comes to.
it does. It is a court battle in a lot of cases, but it's even a issue from my point of view of protocol and respect and dignity. We've got people doing legislative acts which they think that are somehow going to benefit us, and they don't understand that concept of wild rice and clean water, deer meat that's untainted. What do those kinds of things mean to your family?
They mean a lot to me, and they mean a lot to my sons, particularly my oldest son who lives in Red Cliff and Bad River area. He works with Lake Superior. He works for the lake. He works for the animals. And then somewhere down the line, he works for the visitors to the park. You see, so it's not, a battle for us to engage in, enjoying the seasons, putting food on the table, remembering how to make, moccasins and baskets and so on. Those are what form us an identity here. And I don't think that when you sit down to a Big Mac, you get that same full-bodied feeling as when you sit down to a plate of good wild rice soup.
Not
I
going to disagree with you out of that at all. I got to go, especially if the rice comes from the Cogog sloughs out of Bad River.
Absolutely.
We've got 15 seconds. One last thing to anyone out there, and we've got to go. Thanks for joining with us today.
Well, I want to once again thank those people who made my homecoming to the Green Bay, Oneida area so wonderful. And I especially want to tell the youth out there who attended the ceremonies day after day and stood up and spoke the language. Those are the things that we wait for all of our lives, to see our children take that stand and be orators like the rest of us.
Miigwech.
See you later.
See you later. And that is another roundup of news from Indian Country in this edition of the Native News Update. Stay tuned for another edition soon.